theorist right-wing YouTubers breaking into our daycares, demanding access to our children. We've got the President of the United States demonizing our Somali neighbors and wrongfully confiscating funds that Minnesotans rely on. It's disgusting and it's dangerous.
Bye-bye. Good morning. Looking very good and very nice. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. Today is January 6th, 2026. If you turn on the television right now, if you open up the lamestream media or the pages of the New York Times, you're going to see a lot of people, we'll see a lot of weeping and gnashing of teeth about the threats to the democracy. You're going to see footage from 5 years ago. You're going to see pundits lighting candles for the sanctity of our institutions. They want you looking back. They want you looking at the Buffalo shaman. They want you looking at the broken windows from 2021. But I'm telling you right now, do not look back. Look at the bank vault. Because while they're distracting you, while the legacy media is distracting you with a history lesson, the greatest heist in the history of American state government just happened right under our noses. Welcome to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. We're so glad and thankful to have you here. Yesterday afternoon, with no warning, with no fanfare, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, the man the media told you was the nice guy. You know, Barack Obama was looking for somebody dumber for his VP. He chose Joe Biden. Joe Biden was looking for somebody dumber to be his VP. He chose Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was looking for somebody dumber to be her VP. She chose Tim Walz. You know, the coach, the Midwestern dad, the token white guy in the flannel shirt. He announced he is quitting. He will not seek re-election. He's packing his bags. He's taking his pension and he is walking out the door. Now, the media will tell you he is tired. They will tell you he wants to spend more time with his family. Don't believe it for 1 second. Tim Walz isn't retiring. He is fleeing. Yes. Why? Because the receipts just dropped. And the number on the bottom of the receipt is $9 billion. Now, we aren't talking about waste, okay? We aren't talking about a bridge that went over budget. We're talking about feeding our future. We're talking about a sophisticated criminal ring that set up fake nonprofits, fake daycares, fake food banks, and siphoned billions of dollars of COVID relief money out of the Treasury and sent it overseas to literal terrorist groups. They bought luxury cars. They bought real estate in Kenya and Turkey. They bought gold bars. And who signed the checks? Who opened the door? Who looked the other way while the treasury was looted? The nice guy, Governor Walz. And this is what makes my blood really boil about this. This is why I need you to kind of wake up this morning, guys. Take a sip of the Founding Flavors coffee. Brad Beckman over in the chat says, so the goal is to be dumber than Tim Walz. Everyone say hello to the next Democrat VP candidate, Gavin Newsom. Good one, Brad. Compare what is happening to him to what is happening to you. Because right now, as I speak to you, the IRS is warming up a supercomputer to track every single transaction that you make over $600. Did you sell a used lawnmower on Facebook Marketplace? Well, the IRS wants to know. Did you split a dinner bill with your friends on Venmo? The IRS wants a form for that. Did you make $1,000 on crypto in 2021? They will hunt you down to the ends of the earth for their 20%. But if you are a Democratic governor, if you are a member of the ruling class, then no problem. You can lose $9 billion. You can hand the keys to the Treasury to a ring of fraudsters. And what is going to happen to you? Nothing. Do you get handcuffs? No. Do you get a retirement party? You get a golden parachute, and you get the media telling you what a statesman you are for stepping aside. This is not a mistake, right? This is a system. It is a system of plunder. They loot the Treasury at the top. and then they strip search the taxpayer at the bottom. They call it equity. I call it theft. So when you hear them screaming, the legacy media screaming about January 6th today, when you hear them crying about the institutions, ask yourself a question. Who is the real threat to America? Is it the guy taking a selfie in the Capitol Rotunda, or is it the man who leaves the vault open, lets the thieves empty the safe, and then quits his job before the police arrive? I mean, they think you're stupid. They think you won't notice. They think that if you wave a flag and cry about democracy, right, you will forget about the money. Well, we aren't forgetting. We have the receipts. We have the numbers. And for the next hour, we're going to put the American government on trial. Now, Tim Walz is running away, but the truth is catching up. Strap in because the Nice Guy Act is over and the Wake Up America show starts right now. If you're just joining the Wake Up America show, it's nice to see you. Drew Van Runkle will run riot. Relaxing McGroin, Siggy's mom, Cecilia H, BB for Liberty, Nelson 65, Booty Sweat, Thormock, and so many more friends of Liberty. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you here. If you haven't yet, please click the like button and follow if it's your first time watching the Wake Up America show. We would love to have you be a regular guest. This show is Mondays through Fridays, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time here on the Wake Up America show. If you want to join us, click that follow button. You'll get a notification when we do go live. And you can also send us a text at 573-319-1586. That's right. The text lines are always open. That phone number that you see in the bottom of your screen, 573-319-1586. And for those of you who have never watched the Wake Up America show before, just so you know, we have a 3-stage rocket on this show, which is our bonus content. And it has 3 stages of unlocks. The first stage of unlocks, when we hit $100 raised, unlocks our mini documentary, which we have a fantastic mini documentary today. And it's actually at Robbie Thurman's request in a new style. So we are eschewing the Lego style today, and we have a new art style for our mini documentaries, which I hope you will enjoy. If we hit $100 raised in our Rumble Rants or in purchases made at forlibertyshop.com, then we will unlock each subsequent phase. So $100 raises the mini documentary funds. $150 means we get to play a game called The Great Grift Off, Liberty Loot Live. And then if we raise $200, then it's show and tell time. And I bring out an item from my libertarian past, which I share with you, which is a lot of fun. And I tell you, show and tell. So keep those Rumble Rants flowing in. If we haven't already, let's get them started. Start them rolling up. Or if you haven't stocked up on Founding Flavors coffee, then head to forlibertyshop.com and get yourself a box today, or sign up for a subscription for coffee. It'd help us to fuel the revolution. All right, let's get it going.
The great people of Minnesota, a state that was once known as the land of 10,000 lakes, has been turned into the land of 10,000 Somali schemes because of their governor. And don't forget, this is a guy who was at the top of the Democrat Party's ticket, the number 2. He was Kamala Harris's running mate just about a year ago until President Trump crushed them last November. And it was in large part because the president was calling out this fraud. And so this has been a day one priority for the Trump administration, Jesse. The Department of Justice has convicted and prosecuted nearly 100 defendants in Minnesota. And because of these new details and this new reporting that has come to light, this is a all hands on deck across the entire government effort. We are surging resources. You saw today the Department of Homeland Security announced we have nearly 2,000 agents from the Homeland Security Investigations Team. The FBI is on the ground, and we're freezing money. HHS cut off funding for child care centers and for daycares. USDA Secretary Rollins has been asking Governor Walz to see the recipients of SNAP in his state. So this is all hands on deck. Rest assured, it's a top priority for President Trump. And he believes that Governor Walz is criminally liable. And I think the Department of Justice is going to find out.
Well, let's hope so. Let's certainly hope so. Thank you. Drew Van Uncle says, I don't think Caroline knows what top of the ticket means. Thank you, Drew. Very funny. Yeah, top of the ticket means the top. She did correct it after. They say that pride comes before the fall, but in politics, sometimes the fall happens before you even know that you slipped. We're going to talk about the state of Minnesota. And yesterday afternoon, while most of you guys were going to work, a political massive bomb went off in the Midwest. Governor Tim Walz, the man who was almost vice president of the United States just 14 months ago, the man who the media told us was the future of the Democratic Party, the coach, the nice guy, the guy who fixes your lawnmower. He walked out to the podium. He looked tired. He looked defeated. And he announced he's quitting. He will not seek a third term in 2026. Now, if you read the headlines from the Associated Press or CNN, they're framing this as a retirement. Yes, they say that he wants to spend more time with his family. They say he has served his time. They say it is a noble exit. Don't believe a word of it, right? This is not a retirement. This is a surrender. Okay. And more importantly, this is a getaway car. Tim Walz is not leaving because he is tired. He is leaving because the kitchen got too hot and the rats are starting to scurry. Because at the same time that he was bowing out, new documents dropped in Washington, D.C., documents that turn the Feeding Our Future scandal, right, which we thought was kind of a $250 million theft, into something much, much darker, right? We're talking about billions. We're talking about the complete collapse of oversight in a U.S. state. And the man at the top, in this situation, top of the ticket, right? He isn't sticking around to answer questions. He is cashing out. He is on the run. Now, let's look at the numbers, because numbers do not care about your feelings, okay? And they certainly don't care about Minnesota nice. For the last 2 years, we knew that fraudsters in Minnesota took advantage of COVID relief funds. The program was called Feeding Our Future. It was supposed to feed hungry kids, right? That is the shield that they always use. It's for the children. If you oppose this program, then you hate Austin. You hate children. No, I don't hate children. I love kids. I hate theft. And let's be specific about what they stole. Right? This wasn't just waste. Court records show that one defendant alone, Abdimajid Noor, helped steal $47 million. He claimed to serve 18 million meals. In reality, he served almost zero. That one defendant alone helped steal $47 million. He served almost zero. In reality, he served almost zero. Now, where did that money go? It didn't go to sandwiches. It went to a Porsche Macan. It went to a Lamborghini. It went to a private overwater villa at the Radisson Blue Resort in the Maldives. We have the receipts. We have the photos of them popping champagne in the Indian Ocean, while Minnesota taxpayers and everyone else in the United States through these COVID funds footed the bill. They felt so invincible that during the trial last year, someone actually showed up at a juror's house with a bag containing $120,000 in cash, trying to bribe her to let them walk. And that is how deep the rot goes. Gangster tactics. It's like something out of a Soprano episode, funded by your tax dollars. But yesterday, House Oversight Chairman James Comer released the new audit, and the number is not $250 million. The estimated exposure to taxpayers is $9 billion. $9 billion. Let that sink in. That is not a rounding error. That is not someone losing a receipt. That is the GDP of a small country vaporized. How does that happen? How does a governor, a man who claims to be a hands-on leader, right, the coach, how did he miss $9 billion going out the back door? The legislative auditor told us exactly how. In June of 2024, the Minnesota Office of the Legislative Auditor released a report. It was damning. It said that the Department of Education failed to act on warning signs. It said that their oversight was inadequate. They received over 30 complaints about kickbacks. So people were calling the state saying, hey, these guys are demanding money from us. And what did the Walz administration do? Did they call the police? Did they freeze the funds? No. In one case, they asked Feeding Our Future to investigate themselves. That is a fact. They asked them to investigate. Well, we investigated ourselves and we found out we did nothing wrong. Mighty Megatron reminds me that is more than some countries' GDP AP. Thank you. They asked the Foxes to audit the hen house. There are only two options here, and neither of them is good. Option one, Tim Walz is the most incompetent administrator in the history of the United States. I'm willing to believe that. He is an idiot. He simply didn't know. He was asleep at the wheel while his appointees handed out cash to anyone with a fake invoice. Or option two, more likely, he knew. He knew the money was flowing to political allies. He knew because it was buying loyalty. He knew it was greasing the machine that keeps his party in power. And he didn't care because he thought that he would be vice president before anyone checked the books. But he didn't win. He lost. And now the auditors are here. And suddenly, Governor Walz decides it is time to retire. And this brings me to the core of the problem. It isn't just about money. It is about the personality type that allows this to happen. We have to talk about the toxic nice guy. We all know this archetype. The left loves to run these candidates. Right? They aren't the angry radicals. They aren't screaming at you. They smile. They wear flannel shirts. Right? They talk about neighborliness. Right? Tim Walz built his entire brand on being Minnesota nice. Right? Mind your own damn business. Remember that line? He said it with a smile. But what does nice mean in government? Well, usually it means weak. Right? It means you don't want to ask tough questions because it might be rude. It means you don't demand audits because it might look distrustful, right? It means you don't verify the background of the nonprofit director because it might be insensitive. And while you are being nice, while you are worried about your tone, the predators are eating you alive. The looters look at a guy like Tim Walz and they don't see a leader. They see a mark. They see a victim. They saw a governor who was so desperate to prove how compassionate he was that he removed all the safeguards. He took the locks off the doors and he told the world, come on in. The vault is open. Right? This is the tragedy of the modern progressive movement. They are so obsessed with appearing virtuous that they enable pure vice. They wanted to feed kids, they claim. Right? I believe Tim Walz wanted to feed kids, but because he refused to acknowledge that bad people exist or was too afraid of being deemed racist because he refused to govern with skepticism, especially from the community of people who were scamming him, the kids didn't get fed. There were no kids. The criminals got rich and the scammers got away with everything, right? Minnesota nice, they call it. Minnesota nice. They enable pure vice. Chairman Comer is now tracking funds that may have gone to Al-Shabaab and ISIS. And I mean, this is the reality of DICE. And now he wants a pat on the back for his service, right? The merchant versus the looter. Right? There's a concept that we talk about this on this show. The difference between the merchant and the looter. Right? This is straight out of Atlas Shrugged, but we are seeing it play out in real life in St. Paul. The merchant earns his money. Right? Whenever you buy a box of Founding Flavors coffee, I earned that. Whenever you make a Rumble Rant donation here on the show, I earned that. I'm a merchant. Right? The merchant trades value for value. You're enjoying the Wake Up America show. You want to support the Wake Up America show. You donate $5. You buy a box of coffee, right? The merchant trades value for value. That is you. That is me, the guy running the coffee shop, right? The lady who is running your accounting firm, the mechanic, right? You have to prove your worth every single day. I have to get up at 5:30 in the morning, slime my way out of bed with my slime trail and get into the shower, clean off all of the slime and get up in front of you guys and do an amazing show for 2 hours, 5 days a week, or there's no money coming into the Wake Up, or there's no money coming into the Peterson household. If I don't do it, if I don't provide value, then I don't get anything back, right? If I don't do a show, I don't get paid, right? You have to prove your worth every single day. If you lose $1,000, you panic. If you lose $10,000, you might go out of business. Then there is the looter. The looter does not produce. The looter extracts. The looter uses the force of law or the guilt of the nice guy. Right? You take what the merchant produced. Right? Well, what happened in Minnesota is the ultimate victory of the looter. The taxpayers of Minnesota, the merchants, they worked hard. They paid their taxes, they followed the rules, and the State Department acted as the bag man for the looters. They took that value and they redistributed it to fraudsters in Lamborghinis. And here's the kicker. If you, the merchant, make a mistake on your taxes, if you underpay by $50, you get that letter. You get that letter. You didn't pay. Sometimes I've gotten letters from the IRS asking for more money or asking for less money than they must have used to write that letter, print it onto a piece of paper, and send that bit of paper through a coordinated network to get it to my front door. I kid you not. I have gotten underpayment bills from the IRS that absolutely were for less money than it cost for them to enforce that. We've all seen it. All right, if you underpay by $50, you're going to get that letter. The IRS is at your door. They freeze your assets if you don't pay. They garnish your wages. But when the governor loses $9 billion, he gets a press conference. He gets a pension. He gets to go to the lake house. There is no accountability for the political class. There is only accountability for you. So this is why people are furious. Right? This is why the temperature in this country is so high. It's not because of rhetoric. It's not because of tweets. It's because we're watching a heist in slow motion, and we aren't even allowed to call the police because the police work for the guys robbing the bank. So what do? We stop falling for the nice guy act. I don't want a nice governor. I want a competent one. I want a governor who assumes that people will try to steal and sets up the guards accordingly. I want a governor who is a little bit mean or at least suspicious. Second, we need to demand that this investigation doesn't stop just because Walz is quitting. That is the oldest trick in the book. Oh, he resigned. Let's move on. Let's heal. No, do not heal. Investigate, indict, prosecute. If $9 billion is missing, someone should be in handcuffs, not in retirement. We're going to be watching the Comer hearings very closely on the Wake Up America show. We're going to see who else was involved because a governor does not lose that much money alone. He had help. Tim Walz is walking away, but the receipts are forever. So stay tuned. We have Daniel McCarthy today on the Wake Up America show. We've got Camellia Peterson on the Wake Up America show. We're going to talk about the other big story, Venezuela, and the Don-roe Doctrine. You are listening to the Wake Up America show. I'm Austin Peterson. Don't go anywhere.
So great he's not running. Were you surprised that he didn't resign today?
Not surprised he didn't resign. I mean, I think it's hard for politicians sometimes to come to grips with the idea that they've been caught. But this guy's been caught. I mean, let's be honest. He knows that not what's been uncovered is bad, but what is yet to come is likely even worse. That is why he is not running for re-election. He's been done in by hubris. He's been done in by his inattentiveness to the fraud going on in his state. And he was done in by a YouTuber who did the job that the media wouldn't do, which is go in and investigate this fraud in Minnesota that's all come on the watch of that man right there, Tim Walz. He is a buffoon. He is in over his head. He was a terrible pick by Kamala Harris, and there's never been a faster rise and fall in modern political history than that guy right there.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think maybe Gary Hart, 1980s, different circumstances, of course. He had an affair. But this is quick. Like this guy a year ago, 75 million people voted for him, and now his political career is ostensibly over. He'll never serve, maybe, dog catcher somewhere in Minnesota. So he can't run from this accountability that he's going to have to face. Do you think he knew what was going on right under his nose in Minnesota?
Yes. Look, this is a lot of this fraud's happening in the Medicaid program. Medicaid is run by the governor of the state. It's a state program. They take money in from the federal government. Most of it comes from the federal government, but it's administered by the governor and the state government that they run. And he and some of his people have also admitted that they looked the other way when whistleblowers brought the fraud to their feet because they didn't want to look racist for calling it out. I mean, that was one of the stated reasons for not doing anything about it. So, yes, I think they knew about it. I think whistleblowers told them about it. There are even some reports that they tried to penalize or punish whistleblowers for bringing it up, all because it's a political constituency, the Somali community there. I mean, my gosh, they even changed the state flag to look like the flag of Somalia. That's how much of a political constituency it is for Tim Walz. So, yeah, I think he knew. I think he did nothing. And I think he ought to be held accountable for it.
Damn, good shit. I love Scott. We're so grateful to have you here joining us live on the Wake Up America show. How are we doing on the Wake Up America show? Are we raising any bonus content money today? BB for Liberty? If we haven't already, drop $1 in the tip jar. Help us to get on our way to that bonus content to help support the Wake Up America show. Whenever we unlock that bonus content, you know we're going to keep this show on live for another month. The Wake Up America show has a 3-phase bonus content during our live streams. First phase is if we raise $100, you'll unlock our mini documentary. At $150, we all play a game show together, and you can compete for real prizes. And at $200, then we play a little show and tell. So help to unlock that bonus content today. Drop a sweet little Rumble rant or head to forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4, libertyshop.com. We've always got new products dropping over at the shop, so make sure that you visit it every single day. Because when you scroll down on the front page to our latest product drops, you can see the top 3 that just dropped most recently, like our FAFO snapback trucker hat, available at forlibertyshop.com. F around and find out. The Trump Millet Great Liberators poster already flying off the shelf. At forlibertyshop.com, the Trump Millet Great Liberators poster. Sold a bunch of those yesterday at forlibertyshop.com. And for the kids, the Founding Dinos Toddler Tee. Dinosaurs and Founding Fathers. What more could you ask for? For the children, history just got a lot cooler. Yes. So head on over to forlibertyshop.com this morning. Fill up your cart, and if we raise $100, $150, $200, we'll start unlocking that bonus content. Brad says $0 raise. Womp womp. Is it my fault? Did I do something wrong? We're going to take a quick little commercial break. When we get back, the IRS is coming. They're coming. If you've ever made money online in any way, shape, or form, I hope that you paid your taxes on that, because if you made more than $600, they're going to audit you if you didn't pay. We'll be right back. It's the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian. And
always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist. Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins.
I think the reality is that for centuries we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good, and we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently, and it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
It's Zoran Mondani's newest pick right there in New York City. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, patriots, taxpayers, survivors of the woke mind virus, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to close your eyes. Close your eyes. Can you hear that? Listen closely. That is the sound of silence coming from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. That is the sound of the gravy train derailing. That is the sound of the tote bags dropping to the floor. Oh, where's my aw button? Damn. Where's Pikachu? Man, I lost my aw button. Dang, I was going to hit the aw button. Aw. I'll just make the aw button. There we go. Womp. Where's the womp womp? There we go. I have some problems over there too. As of yesterday morning, January 6th, today's Monday, January 6th, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is dead, gone, kaput, dissolved into the ash heap of history where it belongs. After nearly 60 years of picking your pocket to pay for people who hate you, to lecture you about why you are a bad person, the Trump administration and a Republican Congress finally found the spine to say no more. They cut the cord. They stripped $1.1 billion in taxpayer loot from the budget. And instead of trying to survive on their own merit, instead of trying to actually sell a product people want to buy, the board of directors took their ball and went home. They voted to dissolve the entire agency. They basically said, if we can't force the plumber in Ohio to pay for our gender theory puppet shows, we won't play at all. You know what I say? Good riddance. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. Now, the media is currently weeping. Have you seen the headlines? Like, the New York Times is treating this like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. A dark day for democracy, they say. A blow to the integrity of public media, says Patricia Harrison. She's the CEO of the now defunct Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So let's translate for that for the folks in Yorba Linda. When they say integrity of public media, what they really mean is the entitlement of coastal elites, because that is what it has always been about. Now, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at the libertarian angle here, because it is irrefutable. For decades, we have been told that NPR and PBS are essential services, like the fire department, like the roads. But what are they really? They are a wealth transfer, a direct wealth transfer from the working class to the laptop class. The average NPR listener isn't a truck driver in Nebraska. It's an adjunct professor in Brooklyn with 3 roommates and a savior complex, a white savior complex, like the chick we saw at the beginning there. And for 50 years, the federal government has pointed a gun at the truck driver and said, give me your money so the professor can listen to All Things Considered without hearing a mattress commercial. It is the definition of theft. I mean, if your content is so good, sell ads. If your content is so valuable, get subscribers, sell coffee. Joe Rogan doesn't need a federal grant. Tucker Carlson doesn't need a handout. Why? Because people actually want to hear what they have to say. But NPR, they needed your money because they knew you wouldn't give it to them voluntarily. And why wouldn't you give it to them? Let's talk about the culture. Let's talk about the DEI rot that killed this beast. Do you remember Yuri Berliner? He was the brave whistleblower who walked out of NPR last year. Right? He told us the truth. He looked at the voter registration records of the NPR newsroom in Washington, D.C. Do you know what he found? 87 Democrats, 0 Republicans. 87-0. That's not a newsroom, folks. That is a DNC field office with microphones. And who was leading this circus? Morning, Mongoose. Do you guys remember Catherine Marr, the CEO, the woman who was the White House memo specifically cited when they cut the funding? This is a woman who called Donald Trump a deranged racist, a woman who tweeted that the First Amendment was the #1 challenge to her job, a woman who sees white supremacy in a ham sandwich. Right? She turned National Public Radio into National Propaganda Radio. They spent your money covering gender queer dinosaur enthusiasts. That is a real segment. I am not making that up. Okay. While you were worried about the price of eggs, while you were worried about the border, they were using your tax dollars to explore the intersectional trauma of non-binary glaciers. I'm not kidding. That is a real segment. And they had the audacity to call it public broadcasting. Right, there was nothing public about it. It was a private club for people who think that the American flag is a hate symbol, and you were paying the dues. But not anymore. Yesterday, the free ride ended. And notice the excuse they gave for shutting down. Did you catch this quote in the article did you read about this yesterday? They said that they had to dissolve to, quote, protect democratic values. Do you hear the arrogance? Right? They truly believe that without them, you are too stupid to function. They believe that without Big Bird explaining structural racism to your kindergartner, the republic will fall. Well, I have news for the limp-wristed, effete snobs at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. America will be just fine. Actually, we will be better than fine. We will be free. Free from the coercion, free from the indoctrination, and free from the absolute insult of having to subsidize our own cultural destruction. They say PBS and NPR will still exist. They say they have diverse revenue streams. Great. Fantastic. Welcome to the free market. Welcome to capitalism. Let's see how Morning Edition does when it has to compete with reality. Let's see how many tote bags they sell when they can't guilt trip the taxpayer, right? This is a victory, my friends. It is a victory for the wallet, and it is a massive defeat for the regime. They thought that they could force you to pay for their lies forever. All right, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is dead. Long live the American taxpayer. Today's January 6th. If you turn on the television, if you open the New York Times, you know what they're talking about. They're talking about the day of infamy. They're talking about the day of infamy. They're going to replay the footage from 5 years ago over and over again. They want you to be afraid. They want you to believe that the greatest danger to your life, to your liberty, and to your property is a guy in a buffalo hat standing at a podium. But I have a question for you. When you go to sleep, are you afraid of the buffalo shaman? Or are you afraid of the IRS? Because while the media is busy lighting candles for, quote, our democracy, trademark, the federal government has been busy building a weapon. And that weapon isn't aimed at insurrectionists. It is aimed at you. So let's talk about what is actually happening in January 2026. So while they distract you with history, they are implementing the future of surveillance. This tax season, for the first time ever, you are going to see a new form. It's the 1099-DA. DA stands for digital assets. They are coming for your crypto. They are coming for your Venmo. They are coming for your PayPal. For years, they threatened to lower the reporting threshold to $600. They fought about it in Congress, and I had forgotten about it until I read about this yesterday. They passed bills. They repealed bills. But the machinery never stopped. Right? The goal is simple, total visibility. If you sold a couch on Facebook Marketplace, if you bought Bitcoin in 2021, if you split a dinner bill on Cash App, they want to know. And they want their cut. Siggy's mom over the chat says, I appreciate your show, AP. Even if Bongino returns to Rumble, I'm sticking with your show. Well, thank you, Siggy. I hate having to compete with Dan, that's for sure, but I'm grateful to have you here. You have a meeting in 15 minutes. We'll see you all tomorrow. Thanks, Siggy. Appreciate you. See you tomorrow. Siggy's mom has got it going on. Pop, pop, pop. So in the last segment, we talked about how the state of Minnesota lost $9 billion to fraud. $9 billion. Just poof, right? Gone. I mean, did the IRS kick down Tim Walz's door? Did they freeze the state of Minnesota's accounts? No. But if you, Siggy's mom, selling baby clothes on Poshmark, right? If you miss a form, you're treated like a tax cheat until you prove otherwise. This is what we call anarcho-tyranny. It's a concept from the thinker Sam Francis, and it defines the modern American state perfectly. Anarcho-tyranny means the government refuses to enforce the law against actual criminals, right? The looters, the fraudsters, right? The rioters who burn down cities. They get a pass, right? That is the anarchy part. But for you, for the law-abiding middle class, the tyranny is absolute. You are surveilled. You are audited. You are regulated to death. And that brings us back to January 6th. Why are they so obsessed with this date? 5 years later, why do they keep picking at the scab? It is not because they care about the safety of the Capitol building. If they cared about the federal buildings, they wouldn't have let protesters firebomb federal courthouses in Portland for 3 months straight. No, They use January 6th as a moral shield as long as they can point at you and call you a domestic terrorist or an insurrectionist, then they are justified in doing anything that they want to you. We have to spy on your bank account to stop insurrectionists. Right? We have to track your crypto to prevent funding for extremism. Right? Do you see how the game is played? They create a monster, and then they use that monster as the excuse to put a collar around your neck. Right? The reality is the American government is not afraid of a riot. They have the tanks, they have the drones, they have the F-15s. They're not scared of guys with flags. They are scared of you keeping your own money. Right? They're scared of an economy they can't control. They're scared of a citizenry that says no. And that is why the 1099 DA matters more than the January 5th anniversary. One is a media narrative that is designed to make you feel guilty. The other is a policy designed to make you poor. So when you see the clips today, when you see the crying pundits on MSNBC, remember this. They're not crying for the Constitution. They are performing. Meanwhile, the real machinery of the state is grinding forward. And it is grinding up the merchant. It is grinding up the small business owner. It is grinding up the gig worker. So what is the solution? Right? Well, the solution is to refuse to be distracted. Don't let them bait you into arguing about 2021. Argue about 2026. Argue about the fact that the Pentagon failed its 8th audit in a row last month. They lost track of F-35 parts, billions of dollars of equipment missing. But they want to put you in jail for a crypto error. That is the real battle. The battle is not over who sat in Nancy Pelosi's chair 5 years ago. The battle is over who sits in the driver's seat of your life today. Is it you or is it the auditor? We've got Camellia Peterson and Daniel McCarthy coming up next. We're going to zoom out from domestic tyranny to foreign policy realism, because just like they use democracy to control you here, they use democracy to initiate foreign policy changes overseas. J6 was the greatest sin, but Democrats literally set off a bomb inside the Capitol building once. Yes, Arvold. Yes, I was just, Stephanie and I on our little road trip that we had for the holidays, we were talking about the Weatherman Underground, and Stephanie had never heard of this. I was like, yeah, they bombed the Capitol building. They committed all these acts of terrorism. Hold on, let me see if I can find the clip. One second, Arvold. Yeah. Weather Underground. Where, of course, they're not going to show the one clip that I want to play. Hold on. Here it is.
To make it appear they were an important threat. Though the townhouse explosion slowed them down, Weatherman survivors burrowed underground and carried on, eventually claiming responsibility for dozens of bombings.
I remember going to the last above-ground weather, it was the Weatherman or the Weather Underground, the last above-ground convention, and sitting in a room, and the question that was debated was it or was it not the duty of every good revolutionary to kill all newborn white babies? And at that point, it seemed like a relevant framing of an issue. The logic being, hey, look, through no fault of their own, these white kids are going to grow up to be part of an oppressive racial establishment internationally, and so really, your duty is to kill newborn white babies. And I remember one guy kind of tentatively and apologetically suggesting that seemed like it may be contradictory to the larger humanitarian aims of the movement, and being kind of booed down.
Yeah.
One of the Weatherman kids.
It's like when I got booed for saying we shouldn't sell heroin to 5-year-olds. You know what I'm saying? Boo. Idiots. Retards. On November 7th, 1983, a bomb exploded in the U.S. Capitol. The blast caused roughly $1 million of damage. An all-woman group called May 19th was behind it. May 19th hated sexism, chauvinism, and misogyny, but its members weren't interested in the crunchy, women-only lifestyle embraced by the separatists. I think it was a reaction to lesbian separatism and being like, oh, if we just go back to our own land and leave men out of our lives and everything will be fine. we'll wear our Birkenstocks and have our women-only spaces and live our own lives. But for May 19th, revolutionary politics came first. Sexual oppression, capitalism, racism, imperialism, of course. All of that horror went together. Lesbian liberation required national liberation. So lesbians bombed the U.S. Capitol. Lesbian terrorists. I'm not making this up. It's true. History has been hidden from us. But we're going to suss it all out when we have Camellia Peterson and Dan McCarthy after the break. We've got an incredible show for you in the second hour, guys. Don't miss out on the bonus content today. Trump 1/420 says you don't sell it to 5-year-olds. You give it to them free so they start buying it when they're 6, says Trump 1. No. Morning, Dash. Nice to see all of our friends over there. Yeah, this is real history that they don't want you to know. But you're going to hear it here on the Wake Up America show with the powers combined of R Volt 24 and Austin Peterson on the Wake Up America show. You will hear the real history. I hope you're enjoying the Wake Up America show today. If you are, and if you feel this content is valuable to you, we hope that we can earn a tip from you in the form of a Rumble rant. If we raise a certain amount of money today, that unlocks all sorts of fun games and prizes for you guys. Mini documentaries and all sorts of goodies are available to you to unlock today at 3 different funding levels. If we raise $100, that will unlock our mini documentary. And today's is not Lego themed. We have a new art style available for you today for your viewing pleasure. And I think you guys will really get a kick out of it. So I hope we can hit it. But probably the only way we'll be able to do that is if you guys go to forlibertyshop.com and buy yourself a box of Founding Flavors coffee. If you go to forlibertyshop.com this morning, you're going to see all kinds of incredible products available for you. Patriotic products you won't find anywhere else at forlibertyshop.com. But my recommendation to you guys is that when you go to forlibertyshop.com, you scroll down on the front page and click on our Founding Flavors coffee because it truly is delicious. Yesterday I was playing Battlefield 6 with some guys and I was like talking about my coffee and the guy was like, "Oh, it's expensive." And I was like, "No, it's not. Compare it to any other premium coffee." And all the other guys there were some of the guys that had actually bought some and had tried it and they were like, "No, it's really good. You got to try it." And it's actually not expensive when you compare it to the people, because you might look at the price and say, "Oh my gosh, that's so expensive." But then remember that the shipping is included. So usually you'll go to like one of my competitors and they won't include the shipping until you get to the very end. And then you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is more expensive than I had thought." Yeah, well, that's because they kind of tricked you with not showing the shipping. But of course, our price includes shipping, so you don't have to worry about it. The price you see is what you get. We have premium coffee that is the best coffee in the world. And if you do not like my coffee, I will refund you if you do not like the coffee. So we will give you your money back. So you really risk nothing. You either get amazing coffee or you get your money back. Plus, if you buy it during the live show, that goes to unlock the bonus content. So who's going to step up today at forlibertyshop.com, make a delicious purchase of Founding Flavors coffee, try my top 3 favorite Founding Flavors coffees in our bundle so that you can see which one you like, and then sign up and subscribe to it. Let's do it, guys. Let's unlock that bonus content this morning so that Brad Beckman can have a job. What do you say? Brad's like, "Buy the coffee." The Wake Up America show is brought to you in part by viewers and listeners just like you. Our next guest is not only our regular guest who we love and we have on every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 a.m. Central, she is also a member of our 1776 donor club, Peterson's Patriots, ever since we started this show over 3 years ago. Camellia Peterson coming up live next to talk about why gentle parenting failed. Going to talk about that. No, we're not going to say beat your kids. Just, maybe shake them a little bit. Put them up against the wall. Just kidding. We'll be right back. It's the or are we? It's the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network.
When the Founding Fathers dreamed of liberty, they forgot one thing: coffee. Introducing Founding Flavors Coffee, the brew that built America, and the brew that's fueling a new revolution, one kitchen at a time. Small batch roasted, Patriot approved, and disappearing faster than a red coat at Yorktown. Don't get left behind, soldier. Real patriots are starting their mornings with Founding Flavors. And trust us, freedom tastes better with a fresh cup in your hand. Stop drinking those tyrant brews who take your money and don't support your values. Stocks are limited, demand is booming, and your morning deserves a taste of liberty. Order now at forlibertyshop.com before the next shipment gets signed, sealed, and sold out. Founding Flavors Coffee, the official brew of morning rebellions everywhere. Get yours at forlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama.
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian.
and always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Do you hate the deep state? Do you reject the Antichrist in all his ways? Do you believe that aliens controlled LBJ to assassinate John F. Kennedy? Did you know that the shot can put chemicals in you that will make you more sensitive to 5G? Do you love America? Do you want more freedom? Do you like smoking hot red-headed libertarians? Then the AP for Liberty shop is for you! Check out all the awesome new merch and have a happy new year! Fight the deep state, reject the Antichrist! Visit AP for Liberty shop and get your patriotic merchandise now, or the deep state wins!
Look, not all t-shirts are created equal. Some just sit there. Others start conversations. The ones at forlibertyshop.com, they raise eyebrows, win arguments, and occasionally get you banned from PTA meetings. Whether you're repping freedom, mocking tyrants, or just making the left squirm, we've got the gear that says what you're thinking. Loud, proud, unapologetic. Grab yours today at forlibertyshop.com because your shirt should speak louder than your neighbor's bumper sticker. This summer isn't about sunscreen and safe spaces. It's about liberty, laughs, and looking like a red, white, and righteous badass. Welcome to the Summer of Freedom collection. Beach towels bold enough to trigger a liberal arts professor. Tank tops louder than a 4th of July fireworks finale. And mugs that scream, "Don't tread on my cat."
Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. I'm your host, Austin Peterson. Thanks for sticking around through the commercial break. We appreciate you very much for that. Click the like button if you haven't already. If today's your first time watching the Wake Up America show, click the follow button as well. We'd be grateful to have your support and have you come back and join us every Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time. All right, for the last 10 years, if you went on Instagram or TikTok, you were told one thing. If you raise your voice at your child, if you say no without a 5-minute explanation, or God forbid, if you give a timeout, you are traumatizing them. They called it gentle parenting. And they promised that if you just validated every single feeling, you would raise a generation of emotional geniuses. Well, the results are in, and they are a disaster. A massive wave of gentle parenting regret is sweeping the internet right now. It started with a viral confession from a mom named Jacqueline Williams. She spent 10 years doing everything the experts told her to do. And what did she get? She says her kids became anxious, entitled, and completely unable to make a decision without help. She didn't raise diplomats, she raised tyrants. And she isn't alone. A new report from Maclean's magazine confirms the trend. They found that 1/3 of gentle parents are suffering from severe burnout. They are terrified of their own children because it turns out that when you remove authority from the home, you don't get peace, you get chaos. Joining me now is someone who has never been afraid to be the bad guy if it means raising a good kid. Camellia Peterson, welcome back and Happy New Year. Nice to see you.
Good morning. Happy New Year to you too. I don't know that I was, I was trying to think, was I the authoritarian parent? Yes and no. Like, I think I had to find my balance.
Well, so for those who may not know, gentle parenting, do you think you have a good working definition of gentle parenting, or would you prefer me to do it?
I mean, I think gentle parenting basically means that the idea behind that is that, you know, when your child is upset about something, or they want to do something they shouldn't do, or have something they shouldn't have, that your role is to listen to their feelings and to validate those, to kind of mirror them back to them, and, you know, say and help them vocalize what they're feeling and identify it. And verbalize it. And so then you offer, you know, different alternatives or ways that they can cope with that. And I think, you know, as the subject of the lady who wrote this article about her own experience with this found, is that children are not reasonable, rational creatures when they are very young.
No. It took a Harvard-educated PhD to figure this out.
So when you're in the store and he wants the moving, flashing, dinosaur toy, and you say, but you could just take a picture of it and take it home, like, that didn't work. Funny. I think that it's been interesting to watch this trend now. And, I was thinking about how did we get here? Because, she talks about how that, when she was raised, and I think a lot of us who are either millennial or Gen X, relate to this, is that, parenting was more of an authoritarian approach. Like, you did what you were told because that's what your parents said, and you did not need an explanation for that or any rationale, right? Now, I will say my own experience was probably not quite that. It was a little bit of a mix. My parents always, I knew I was expected to obey, and, it wasn't going to do me any good to ask questions, but also my parents weren't afraid to talk about why they did what they did and made the decisions that they did. So that was, I guess, my experience was a little bit better in that sense. But there is, I think, and poor firstborn children, God bless firstborn children. I'm sorry, Hazel Rose. You will get to bear all of your parents' mistakes as they find their way in this.
BB for Liberty says, my sister loves gentle parenting. It runs her entire household. At Christmas, her son gave me a bloody nose. Her daughter threw her ham at the Christmas tree, and her dog bit my calf. Interesting. Gentle parenting.
Well, what's interesting is the lady who wrote this article about this experience. First of all, she is a therapist, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. But she talked about how that in their experience and her trying to use all of these, tried and true processes, that she read all of these blogs and all of these people who had all these Instagram accounts that showed all of this success and these perfect children, because it was all gentle parenting, right? It wasn't working for her very well. And at some point, her husband had to step in and be the bad guy. So they ended up with a good cop, bad cop scenario all the time in their parenting, which is terrible for the development of your children. So anyway, so it was a really good article about, their experience and coming through that. And, the balance that they had to end up with. I think, unlike a lot of parents, they actually found their way through that. And maybe it was because, part of her probably being a therapist was that she was looking for better answers. But, one of the really interesting things that to me about her stories was she told during the pandemic, she told about them going to take a walk, and her son, wanted to ride his bike when they were going to walk instead. And it became this great big meltdown. And her mother-in-law was there. And so she's embarrassed, and she's kind of trying to explain to her mother-in-law and her mother-in-law just said, "You're doing too much, do less." And I was like, that is really just it, right? I think parents have become just so hyper, worried about, how to raise their kids and do this and that right and all the perfect things. And they just need to do less. And I think it was Dr. Spock is right. More than you think you do. So I'm a big fan of don't listen to listen to the people, but know that, you respect in terms of parenting, but also keep in mind that your kids are different. And, all of this other advice that's out there, 99% of it, you can just throw out the window.
If you're just tuning in the Wake Up America show, I'm speaking to Camellia Peterson this morning about the gentle parenting trend, which is blowing up in a lot of these parents' face. Are you surprised that so many parents are having a negative reaction to the gentle parenting, that it's not working for so many parents?
Oh, not at all. I think when you saw all the success stories about this, it's because it's selective, right? You're not going to post it on social media or write articles about it if you're not having success with it. And so I think that, eventually, we've gotten to the point where some people are like, okay, this is not working and I'm going to say something about it. But no, this gentle parenting will work with some kids. This is really all about knowing your individual child. And there are some kids that you just have to lay down the law for, and they're not going to reason and, their way through anything. So this is so much about, and I think it's so hard for parents these days when a lot of times both parents are working and things are so busy. And it's so important to be intentional about spending time with your kids so that you do know, what they need and what works for them.
Do you think that there's a lot of pressure for parents nowadays to have this kind of style of parenting right now, that there's a lot of peer pressure and social pressure?
Oh, sure. I mean, like there's, I think there was a big pushback against like the authoritarian do what I say because I said so, because that looks mean, right?
Mean. There's nothing worse than being mean.
I know, right? So, I mean, yeah, I think that especially because as, people are able to exchange all of these ideas and everything, people are afraid of the judgment of other people too, right? I mean, it's one of the things that she talks in there about that. I think that it is hard to strike a balance socially and in raising your kids, is that if teaching your children appropriate social boundaries and etiquette and practices, while also not stifling and stamping down their spirit too and their individuality. And I think that's where she thought in her own upbringing that she had thought that she had been stifled as a child. And I think the older you get, right, the wiser you get, as she realized that her mom was doing some pretty good things that actually benefited her. But I do think there is this pressure from people judging you, about, what you're parenting. And that's more and more so as you see online, because goodness, you can find anything out there. You can go down the parenting rabbit hole of all of the mommy blogs and different things. It's depressing. Like I would not recommend that anybody do that. Yeah, you are enough.
well, it's interesting too, because everybody has sort of a different definition of what would be considered mean or too far or too aggressive. And for example, with Hazel, she's reaching the age of the terrible twos. So, every once in a while she'll kind of do something it's a little bit off limits, right? She might reach her hand back and just for no reason at all decide to slap you across the face, or while you're changing her diaper, try and kick you in the face or something. And I just have one word that I use, which is kind of like you're going too far. And I just give her a strong, not too loud, but loud enough. I just go, hup. And she just melts right there. And that is enough for her to just melt and be like, and then she hugs me and she's like, so sorry. But not every kid is going to be like Hazel, right? And they're going to react to just one little short noise. Some kids, they might need corporal punishment. Did you get spanked as a kid?
Sure.
I did.
I mean, I would not say excessively, but yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
I wasn't excessively spanked, but
yeah.
Did you ever get switched with a mulberry switch? From a mulberry tree?
Yeah, the whole go pick your own switch.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I will tell you, one of the things that stands out in my childhood is when, I don't know what in the world I did, but because I was a good child, right? No. Whatever I did, my dad, I don't know, gave a belt or switch, or maybe it was a switch that I had to go pick up. Anyway, he wanted me to spank him, to punish him with it. And that was traumatic to me as a child. And he was making a point that this was not pleasant for them to do. So it was eye-opening for me as a child in terms of, because you think, your parents are mad at you and they're just beating you because that makes them feel good or whatever, they're getting their anger out. But that's not true. And that is the approach to parenting. If you're going to use corporal punishment at all in a very limited use, it has to be something that is for a reason and is not excessive. And so I think that, that was his way of showing me that this was as hard for them as it was for me. Although as a kid, you're like, whatever.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, we had a mulberry tree in the front yard, and the branches of a mulberry tree are long and thin, so kind of like a weeping willow in some sense. So whenever we would really get out of line, Dad would go and he would break off a branch off the mulberry tree, and he didn't even have to use it. He just had to you could hear it. It would switch. You knew. I think he used it on us maybe once, but the threat of the corporal punishment was enough. So, do you still got a daughter at home, one daughter who's grown. I mean, do you feel proud of the way that you parented, right? Or is there anything that you wish you'd done differently, or do you feel like you did a good job?
I mean, I absolutely made my share of mistakes, right? I mean, and especially probably the older one got it, more than the younger. And they're two very different people too. So, the parenting approach to both is different. Yeah, made my share of mistakes, but I will say that in my kind of evolution as a parent, because I do so important that you're always working on yourself too, right? To be a good parent, you need to be a good person. And so, I remember reaching the point where I decided that I was not going to say no just for the sake of saying no because I didn't feel like it or didn't want to do it or whatever it was, that I was going to say yes anytime that I could if it was, within reason, so not excessively. And but there were times like my girls and I talked about this, that I would always try to give them the reason and rationale for the decisions, but there were going to be times that they were going to have to accept that I was going to say no, and there was not going to be a rational explanation that they were going to understand. Because there are those times where, as a parent, you instinctively know that this is not right for your child, and the answer is no, and you may not be able to fully explain that to them, and that's okay. So I think that was one of when I developed more of that mindset, I think that helped, because I do think that it's easy as a parent, especially if you were raised in more of an authoritarian type household, that, you just say no, to everything. No, we don't need to do that. Just because so I think that you kind of trying to put yourselves in their shoes too. And because sometimes adults forget how to be kids. And I think that affects your parenting too.
That's good. So if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of parenting advice, what would it be?
Relax.
How can I relax? My daughters are going to stick batteries in their mouth and they're going to turn out to be degenerates.
No, one of the things and I will say this lady, her experience with this has probably made her a better therapist. One of the things that she talked about was that her son your kids will test you. And her son was testing her at one point, and she told him no on something several times, and he just kept at it, just wearing her down. And finally she gave in, and he was like, "But I thought you said no." He didn't really want it. He was testing her. Your kids will do that to you. They want that is one of the most important things I will say that I learned as a parent is if I set a consequence or said something, I had to follow through, because if you do not follow through, they know they can push you anywhere they want.
Very true. Camellia Peterson joining us live on the Wake Up America show. It's nice to have her here with us today. Hope that you're enjoying. If you are enjoying the show, make sure to click the like button and come back and join us every Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Central Time on the Wake Up America show. All right, open topics, Camellia. What's been going on in your world? What's anything that the top of your mind? I know you've been so busy. It feels like you didn't really even get a break, but what's going on?
I didn't go anywhere over the holidays, and that's exactly what I wanted. So I just stayed holed up in my house. But no, we're getting ready for legislative session, and so I will be headed to your neck of the woods later this afternoon. And so in the morning, we'll be doing some radio. I think I get to sit in on a segment with the governor, and so we're going to talk about income taxes and eliminating them in Missouri. So that's kind of that's the biggest focus right now.
Don't get my hopes up.
Well, I'm counting on you coming and testifying in committee again.
I will be there. You can bet on it, because I'm more than just a talking head on a podcast.
That's right.
You got to show up for the fight for liberty. Yeah. I'm about to talk to Daniel McCarthy, writer at the New York Post. We're going to talk about Maduro and the capture of Maduro by Donald Trump. Any thoughts on that foreign policy interventionism, Camellia? Is it a sign of an imperialist president, or is it good to see communists suffer?
I mean, two things can be true at once, right? This is, I thought a lot about this, and I guess my stance on this is that I am reserving judgment, because am I skeptical that this is going to result in an ultimately a better outcome? Yes, I am skeptical. However, I don't know, this is better. If we can limit it to this, and not further insert ourselves into, building another government in another country and regime change and all of this kind of stuff where we don't need to be. Like, I don't like the talk of doing this to other countries and things like that, but maybe this is, carrying a big stick and, at least the threat of the switch, right?
Yeah.
So maybe that's what this is. I think that it's really like when you're talking about your principles living in the real world, when it comes to foreign policy, I think it's really difficult to strike that balance. And that's what I'm looking for, because, somebody said yesterday, I think in the chat on your show, that they have to be really thoughtful in their approach to this and things. And I agree, but our problem is like, our government leaders are not always particularly thoughtful.
Yeah, no, we've got a really great piece of bonus content today that we haven't unlocked just yet about just that topic. So, Camellia, anything else you want to share or plug before we let you go?
You can find me on social media at Rare Camellia, and Happy New Year to everyone, and glad to be back at it.
Happy New Year, Camellia. Thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you more often here in Jefferson City. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone.
That's Camellia Peterson. We're always grateful to have her here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 8 a.m. Central on the Wake Up America show. Camellia Peterson has been a big supporter and follower and supporter of the Wake Up America show since we started. People like Nelson65 are keeping it together. Thanks, Nelson. Looks like we might not make the bonus content today. We are getting up there, but it's a little bit challenging. I get it. Sometimes people are a little tapped out. No problem. I'll just save the bonus content for tomorrow if you'd still like to see it. But if you want to see it today, then make sure you visit forlibertyshop.com. That's the number 4. libertyshop.com. The first phase of our bonus content unlocks a mini documentary at a $100 level raise. That mini documentary unlocks, and you can watch that instead of commercials. But it looks like we're going to have to hit commercials because Daniel McCarthy is coming up, and we got to go to commercial break. So don't touch that dial, guys. We've talked about how good the government steals your money in Minnesota. We've talked about how they spy on your bank account with the IRS. But what about the empire? What about the liberal international order? Well, the fire's going out. The rats are fleeing the ship. When we come back, Daniel McCarthy joins us to break down the collapse of the neocon dream and the rise of the Don-roe Doctrine. Is America finally coming home? Find out in about 2 or 3 minutes. You are listening to the Wake Up America show on the 4 Liberty Network.
Imagine bringing George Washington back to life. Just to explain that in 2025, men can get pregnant, waving an American flag might offend someone, and our government is $34 trillion in debt. But that's not all, George. We have drag queen story hour for toddlers. Pronouns are mandatory. And Harvard can't define woman. Oh. And we send billions to Ukraine but can't fix potholes in Ohio. You know, just normal modern empire stuff. I'm sure he'd be totally cool with it. Right after he finishes reloading. He didn't cross the Delaware for this nonsense, but you can carry on the fight with gear that would have made King George cry. Shop bold, shop free, shop forlibertyshop.com.
Are you tired of the strange radioactive effects of leftist culture? Do you ever wonder what happened to good old-fashioned American values? Well, fear no more, because there's a new force fighting back against the cultural rot of today. Introducing Culturama, a right-of-center talk show that's taking back the future today. Hosted by none other than blonde bombshell herself, Daniela Pensack. She's not just talking, she's taking culture back. With sharp takes, brilliant guests, and a few surprises along the way. Tune in to the live video podcast twice a week, because the future doesn't have to be weird. It can be Culturama!
If there wasn't going to be somebody who was a fiery champion of liberty, somebody who would get out there and who would be aggressive, and if they wouldn't do it with more fire or passion than I had, then I would go and I would fight this battle for us. I've fought for the principles that we all share. Parties tend to be secondary to me. We're here because we believe in the principles of liberty. I am not a perfect messenger, but I think I'm a damn good one. This is a replica of our first president's flintlock pistol. You have my full support, my respect, and my gun.
I think that at the heart of my philosophy is much more libertarianism than
well, that's the fashionable word these days, I guess. A conservative is no longer just that. He's a libertarian. And
always has been.
Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything.
What is fascism? Fascism is private ownership, private enterprise, but total government control and regulation.
Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government, get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.
Welcome back to the Wake Up America show with Austin Peterson. We're glad and thankful to have you here. You know, we spend a lot of time on this show talking about the micro tyranny, right? The tax man, the regulator, the school board. But we have to look at the macro, because the same people who think they have the right to run your life here, the same people who think they have the right to run the entire planet. So for 30 years, the foreign policy establishment, the blob, has told us a fairy tale. They told us that if we just bombed enough countries, if we just built enough embassies, if we just spent enough trillions, we could turn the whole world into a liberal democracy. Well, look around. The world isn't liberal, it isn't democratic, and it is broke. The, quote, adults in the room failed, and now we are seeing something new. We are seeing a return to capital R realism. We are seeing a return to capital N, capital I, national interest. And the establishment is terrified. Here to explain why the liberal order is collapsing and why we should let it fall is the editor of Modern Age and one of the sharpest minds in the movement, Daniel McCarthy. Welcome back to the Wake Up America show. It's nice to see you again.
Thanks, Austin. Always a delight to join you.
So the vibe shift, Daniel. So we're watching the foreign policy establishment have a collective nervous breakdown over Trump's second term, specifically this overturning of Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela. Is this kind of just standard partisan hysteria, or is the liberal international order actually facing a death blow this time?
Well, it's pretty funny because, of course, defenders of what's called the liberal international order, which is basically, as you say, kind of a international projection of the very same kind of New Deal, Great Society mentality that tries to run everything in the United States. This set of people who normally are in favor of the United States getting involved in any kind of, situation abroad that might come up, they're suddenly horrified that President Trump would engage in a very short, very effective operation to remove Nicolas Maduro from power in Venezuela. And it's because he's doing it, precisely in the way that they disapprove of. They want open-ended kinds of engagements. They want to see, the attempt to manage foreign societies. They don't want to see something, as simple as identifying a foreign leader as a source of trouble in his region and a source of danger to the United States and just simply removing him. And then instead of getting deeply involved in a kind of Iraq war-style prolonged occupation and attempt to redesign a country, let that country sort out its own issues. And that's basically what we're seeing happen now with Venezuela, which is going to be tough. I mean, Venezuela is facing, they've got a regime that is still in power, even with Maduro removed, which is a very nasty socialist regime. But the Venezuelans have seen, okay, if you have a leader like Maduro, there's a chance that he's going to get, nabbed and taken to New York and put on trial. So that gives an incentive to the regime, hopefully, to start to, kind of ease up a bit. And we have seen some examples, over the decades in Latin America of countries that went from dictatorships and authoritarianism and socialism even to freer systems. So the Sandinistas eventually got voted out of power in 1990 and accepted the results of an election and left power peacefully in Nicaragua. And Augusto Pinochet on the right ultimately accepted a constitutional referendum that threw him out of power in Chile. So there are some precedents for, happier endings in Latin America. But of course, it's something we Americans can't micromanage. It's something where ultimately Venezuelans themselves have to take responsibility for it.
Dan, you've written about how Trump doesn't talk like a diplomat. He talks like a boss. Why is that more transactional style actually safer for world peace than the moral crusades of the last 30 years?
Well, that's exactly it. One of the original insights of liberalism at its very beginning, in the 17th century and afterwards, was that if you have these kinds of wars of religion that Europe had for a century at that point, there's nothing to negotiate. You're dealing with, such absolute principles on either side that you wind up simply with people killing one another until you reach a point where the sheer amount of violence has discredited both sets of ideals, and people then become more practical or more willing to compromise. So liberalism understood that if you have, these battles over principle, they're often things that simply cannot be worked out in a realistic fashion. And so, if you have battles that are over territory, battles that are over money, over questions like, possession of oil, or over specific policies like what's on these boats that are coming from Venezuela into the Caribbean and then ultimately to the United States, those are small enough matters or things that are, fungible enough if money's concerned that they can actually be dealt with in a negotiated fashion. And so you get wars that are more limited when you have those kinds of concrete interests that are at stake. Whereas you get more unlimited wars and things that are, trying to bring heaven down to earth if you have an ideological or even a principled objective like trying to democratize and liberalize, a foreign country like Afghanistan or Iraq.
So we now have a new term, the Don-roe Doctrine. We are seeing a pivot away from Europe and the Middle East and a focus on the Western Hemisphere. So is this the modern Monroe Doctrine? Writ large, is Trump enforcing a concept that was an illegal concept, but is sort of a metaphorical concept that very much in practice leads to, actual foreign policy outcomes? Talk to us a little bit about the Don-roe Doctrine.
Yeah, the original Monroe Doctrine simply said that, we were not going to allow Europe to plant new colonies in the New World, including in South America. And it also said that if you had a revolt of one of the colonies belonging to Spain or another European power in Latin America, that the United States would not look kindly upon Europe trying to reclaim that colony in revolt. So it didn't say that we were going to export democracy to Latin America, but it basically said that if Latin America started to claim democracy or liberty for themselves, that we would be supportive of that, we would be friendly towards that, and we would discourage, including with force, discourage the Europeans from either establishing new colonies or trying to reassert authority over colonies that had rejected European rule. The Don-roe Doctrine now with Donald Trump is basically saying that, if we have leaders within the Western Hemisphere who are provoking the United States or causing trouble for us, and we think that we can, put a limited amount of force into use to teach them a very painful lesson, that we will actually do that, and that will then hopefully set up incentives not only in that country but also for the entire region to be freer, to be more accommodating to the United States, to go along with the United States interests. Now, it's kind of, in some ways, partly like the Monroe Doctrine, but partly also a little bit like our Cold War experience, and not necessarily the Cold War experience we had in Latin America, where things often got out of control. And we supported some pretty authoritarian right-wing regimes. We supported some insurgencies, which then continued to be, very armed and quite difficult to control, even after socialists were thrown out of power. So things in the Cold War in Latin America didn't necessarily work out so well, or at least they were complicated. Whereas in Europe, it actually did work out very well. We were basically able to say, you know what, we're not going to let socialism expand, we're not going to let communism expand, and we're going to show that, in fact, free Western European countries are integrated with us economically and are very prosperous, and therefore, people who live in Western European countries can see that it's much better to have freedom and prosperity than it is to have socialism. I think the Trump administration is actually ultimately aiming to do something like that in Latin America, to show that countries like Argentina under Milei can have very good relations with the United States, that they're going to have prosperity and peace and security, and that countries like Venezuela, on the other hand, are going to be given an opportunity, with the capture of Maduro, they're going to be given an opportunity to reevaluate the socialist path that they're currently on, and hopefully both the government and the people there will be able to see, okay, the Maduro path leads to a dead end, and it's time to take a better and freer and more prosperous approach instead.
Dan, why are the Liz Cheneys of the world more afraid of an America First foreign policy than they are of actual nuclear war? What is the specific threat to them from the Don-roe Doctrine?
It's partly precisely about what you said at the beginning, this idea of domestic control. And a lot of these folks like Liz Cheney, even though they're not necessarily the most, sophisticated or intelligent people in the world, they understand intuitively that their claim to power, their claim to authority, their claim to be able to lecture us, let alone to have power in government, is all based on morality. And it's all based on this idea that they are somehow morally superior to the rest of us because they're standing up for what they claim to be a principle that has to be made effective and real upon the earth. Now, unfortunately, every time they actually try to implement their principle, they wind up simply, centralizing power. They wind up getting involved in conflicts abroad that they are not able to end, let alone bring about, the kind of successful changes they want to bring about. So their whole, sort of religious worldview is false. And yet it's something that, if they are able to get people to defer to it morally, they will be able to exert power over government, over individuals, over the conscience itself. And they see it as a threat that Donald Trump completely rejects that whole moral apparatus and instead looks at the world in more practical, realistic, and transactional terms.
Now, Dan, this next question, I hope you'll forgive me because I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, and I need a little bit of time to set it up. And I hope you'll forgive me if I just monologue for just a moment as I try and get my thoughts out here, and maybe you can help me put them together a little bit better at the end of this. But I'm very much reconsidering the foreign policy views of my Ron Paul years. You and I met a long time ago in Washington, D.C. when I was, Ron Paul's, one of his biggest acolytes. And one of the, as a matter of fact, the reason why I was so inspired by Ron Paul initially was because of his entanglement with Rudy Giuliani over the question of 9/11 and the reason why Osama bin Laden attacked us. I have subsequently come to the realization, and I still could be wrong, of course, that those views were actually incorrect. That the reason why Osama bin Laden attacked us was not just because of our foreign policy interventions, but because radical Islam is opposed to Americanism and to the Judeo-Christian views that most Americans hold. And of course, because of our alliance with Israel and, our bases in Saudi Arabia, et cetera. And now I find myself in a very difficult position. I find myself as a person who still very much believes in individualism, the principles of liberty, who believes in the concepts of, of Adam Smith and of capitalism. But I don't find myself sort of fitting in with the Cato Institute people or with the Paul type, Mises type people on foreign policy, but I very much kind of identify with what Donald Trump is doing from a foreign policy perspective. It's, he's talking loud and carrying a big stick, right? Not talking softly. So now I find myself in a position where the people who are closest to my ideological ilk, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, maybe even Marjorie Taylor Greene, perhaps, right, are now railing against Donald Trump. Tucker Carlson now railing against Donald Trump for foreign policy, calling him an imperialist, saying the same old things that, Ron Paul might have said back in the day that I really just don't identify with anymore. I really am just trying to find a more realistic foreign policy view. And I just don't, I can't I can't get my feathers ruffled over watching a communist get black bagged in the middle of the night and brought to justice in a court in New York City. Can you give me an analysis of the, I would say the liberty movement, but really it's kind of like maybe the dissident right or the old right or the remnant and the liberty movement? I mean, you understand these terms. So help me to understand, how do you feel about like sort of where we're at? Because the libertarians are still saying the same thing on foreign policy, but I've definitely changed. I just don't identify with anymore because it seems that this form of non-interventionism, it kind of requires other countries to not intervene with us too, which means that it all falls apart. Because if if all the other countries are spying on us and the Chinese are sending balloons over us, then it's essentially war without them necessarily bombing us. How do you look at the situation that we find ourselves in, where the old Tea Party libertarian style Republicans are still beating the drums of non-interventionism, where the world has seemingly kind of moved on, but Republicans always sort of disagreed with libertarians on foreign policy? Am I wrong? Are they wrong? Help me to understand like where we're at right now with this view of foreign policy. The old isolationists, of which I know you are deeply familiar, are sort of embodied by Tucker Carlson and kind of Thomas Massie and Rand Paul to a certain degree, but it really feels out of step with where MAGA is going, which seems to be a more, grounded in reality foreign policy. How do you analyze all of this, Daniel? And I'm sorry to kind of, go on and on about this, but I'm just not quite sure how to ask the question.
No, it's a great question. And in fact, what you said at the end there is exactly the core of the question, I think. So back in the days of the Iraq War, you basically had an idealistic, imperialistic neocon foreign policy on the one hand, which had these open-ended, and really, utopian goals for places like Afghanistan and Iraq, and really, for the entire planet. I mean, you had neocons like David Frum publishing books called An End to Evil, where they were actually imagining bringing about some kind of secular millennium through U.S. military power. So when you had that kind of idealistic, utopian, imperial foreign policy, it seemed natural enough that, if you had a idealistic, non-interventionist foreign policy as the alternative to that, it would, at least mitigate the evil. It would prevent us from getting involved in these forever wars in the Middle East and elsewhere. So back then, that made perfect sense. Whereas now, it's a question of, do you in fact have these two warring kinds of idealism or competing kinds of idealism, a, sort of pure non-interventionist idealism on the one hand, or an imperial utopian neocon idealism on the other? Or is it possible to have a realism that is kind of not either of those camps, that is in fact saying, well, there is a place for the use of force in foreign policy, but it's limited and it has to actually achieve the goals that you set for it. It can't simply be that we're going to, bring heaven down to earth by having these open-ended, conflicts in an attempt to change every other regime on the planet into something that looks like, the U.S. Constitution and our own form of government. And of course, the flip side of this is not just foreign policy, but also immigration policy. And one of the things that's always been on my mind, and you did hear Ron Paul occasionally allude to this even back in the day in the early 2000s, but it's something that's, I think, even clearer now. And unfortunately, a lot of libertarians don't talk about it the way that at least Ron Paul occasionally alluded to 20 years ago. And that is, if you have an immigration policy which is going to prevent radicals from coming into your country in the first place, then you will succeed in preventing things like 9/11 from happening. 9/11 was an immigration problem. It was, we had all of these, Islamic radicals who, first of all, should never have been invited into our country in the first place. And second, when they did come in, they were allowed to overstay their visas and then perpetrate a series of terrorist attacks on 9/11. So if we had just taken our immigration laws a lot more seriously back then, we would have, saved thousands of American lives as a result of keeping these radicals out of the country or expelling them, in a very rapid fashion as soon as they had their visas had expired. So, again, there's a tension here between libertarians who recognize the reality of that and libertarians who on principle say, hey, no, you can't throw people out of your country for any reason. You have to have open borders. You have to have mass migration, and then as a result, when you have these these attacks on us, these libertarians are either left to say, well, we either have to be defenseless, we have to let this happen, or we have to now adopt the neocon policy and say, well, since we can't protect America itself as a nation state, we have to now go abroad in search of monsters to destroy and try to change the whole world into a kind of safe, liberal, democratic, American-style political system in order to prevent, radicals from the Islamic world or elsewhere coming over to America and inflicting thousands of casualties upon our civilians. So realism, I think, is a much better answer in the long run than idealism, even of a non-interventionist kind. I have a lot of friends who are non-interventionist idealists, and they've got good motives. Some of their ideas are quite good, but their ideas translate into something which is which makes for a great critique if you want to be a podcaster and just bash President Trump, but actually doesn't work in terms of a policy that your country is actually going to follow or that's going to keep your people safe.
Do you think that the overemphasis, or I would say even the obsession on foreign policy, non-interventionism, has sort of retarded the libertarian movement in many ways in the modern era?
It certainly is it's symbolic of a bigger problem with libertarianism, which, as I just mentioned, also touches on something like immigration. The whole question is, do libertarians actually believe that there is such a thing as a country? We could use the word nation state. We don't have to. I think, America is a federal system. That's an important thing. But in general, libertarians don't know whether they're saying, and also, there's a problem too, which is parallel on the domestic side to this split between realists and idealists in foreign policy, where libertarians often want, an absolutely perfect policy according to their ideology, rather than something that is actually acceptable to the American people as voters and something that can actually be realistically implemented. So, if you go to a Libertarian Party convention, and I know you know what those are like, you'll have people saying, yes, you should be selling, fentanyl out of vending machines in, you should, not in public schools. The problem there, of course, is that you have public schools, right? Yeah. So you can have fentanyl sold in vending machines as long as it's not in public schools, because you shouldn't have public schools at all. You understand where these people are coming from, but they just sound like freaks to ordinary Americans. Yeah. Whereas you should be able to sell the things that, like, look, liberty is actually good for you in the life that you lead, in the practical life that you have, working a job and raising a family, paying taxes that are too high. Liberty is something you need more of, for the ordinary life that you have. It's not something, and for making your life better. It's not something you need just to support the most, sort of outlandish kinds of thought experiments that libertarians often get addicted to pursuing. And foreign policy is a lot like that, because in foreign policy too, libertarians basically say, one of the things that, bugs me about, even some of my friends on this foreign policy issue is they say, okay, the state is inherently evil. I understand that as a principle. But then they only apply that to the state that is in the United States. Yes. So they say, well, anything the United States is doing in foreign policy is definitely evil. It's being run by the CIA. It's all about, taking away other people's liberties abroad. But then if you say, well, what is communist China doing? What is, Nicolas Maduro doing? Well, they're totally innocent. Somehow the state in communist China or the state in, in Venezuela or anywhere else is just not doing, or in Iran, it's just not doing any of these things which libertarians at home recognize as being deeply, deeply evil.
Right. Or if you point it out, Dan, then you're a neocon warmonger who must have ulterior motives and want regime change because you're obviously beating the drums of war, which leads me kind of my final question on this one, because those sort of, I don't know, autistic views on things, which are, highly, highly specified. It seems as if, like, the conspiracy theories of the libertarian movement to some extent have sort of infected the new right, where you have, and maybe you could call them the very online right, but many of them are very prominent, have big shows. Tucker Carlson seems to have adopted many of those same views, right? And you are a person who is, like myself, comes out of that same movement of people who on the new right, I'm sure many of them, they agree with Tucker. Tucker has one of the biggest podcasts in the world. He seems to be espousing these views. Is it just that he feels his own personal guilt of blood on his hands from the Iraq war? Or do you think was he really impacted by Congressman Ron Paul during the 2008-12 campaigns? And he bought into those foreign policy views because, the resurgence of what you might call Pat Buchananism in the GOP, it is a very real phenomenon. And many of them share those same foreign policy views that are not realism, that you might say. And these are very prominent people. And many of them are, they have millions of views, Daniel. So do you see this happening on the broader new right as well?
Well, I will say Pat Buchanan was always more of a realist than people might realize. And that, the sort of brand of Pat Buchanan as a pure peacenik is simply not correct. And if you go back and look at his policies during the Cold War, or if you look at the things he's said about even the post-Cold War world, he wants to stay out of neocon nation-building operations, that's for sure. But he has always, seen a need for force in foreign policy. He's not a libertarian. He has, a certain grounding in realism. And then, I think very highly of Ron Paul. I worked for his campaign back in 2008. I think he's right about a lot of things. And in some cases, he's even right about things which, other libertarians have kind of chosen to ignore and overlook. He did tend to have a more realistic approach to something like immigration, for example, than most other libertarians do. In terms of what's happening now, though, I mean, so much of, what you find on the right in general, certainly with libertarians, but also on the new right as a whole, is a well-merited skepticism toward a lot of kinds of authorities in America. They realize they've been lied to for decades by our leaders in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And the trouble is, that's true as far as it goes, but you can't just say that, therefore, anything that, a political normie might say is false simply because it's being said by that sort of person. And in fact, not only is it false, but the exact opposite has to be true. You're just going to flip upside down the neocon worldview. And instead of saying, look, Russia's about to invade, France and England, and then, the United States, which is a crazy neocon fantasy, then instead you're going to say, oh, so Russia's not a danger at all. Then in fact, America is, the aggressor in Europe. It's substituting one kind of oversimplification and stupidity for another. And, it's an overreaction, unfortunately. And it's very human that people overreact and try to overcompensate for the dumb things that they're hearing from other sides. And I think the alternative to that is simply, you have to be willing to engage in the hard work of actually thinking things through as individual cases, thinking things through in, a much more realistic way, not simply saying the world is divided into angels and devils, but rather looking at, the things that we do that are wrong. I think, a lot of our friends on the new right and among libertarians are right that there's, the U.S. has made huge mistakes in the past, but that doesn't mean we're always in the wrong. And it certainly doesn't mean that our opponents in the world are always in the right. I mean, far from it. So,
yeah, Dan, it really makes me feel a lot better to hear you say this. After building a libertarian audience for a number of years, it's very difficult going through the painful process of growth, because when you start to change or moderate your views on certain things, the audience really doesn't like it, which probably explains why so many podcasters are terrified of their audiences and won't say certain things, but not here. Daniel, where can people find you online or read more about your work?
Yeah, I edited a publication called Modern Age, and you can find that publication online at modernagejournal.com. You can follow me on social media. On Twitter, I am at Tory Anarchist. So that's a nice topic for a future podcast, perhaps.
We definitely will.
Yeah, you can also find my work. I have a syndicated column published every Tuesday or so, and that often runs in the pages of the New York Post and in Chronicles Magazine and elsewhere.
Daniel, you're a mensch. Thank you very much for your time today and being so generous. You're a great writer and a great thinker. I'm always interested to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time today.
Thanks, Austin.
Thank you very much. That's Dan McCarthy. Yeah, follow him over on X. He's a great follow, at Tory Anarchist. Highly recommended. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Wake Up America show today. And of course, thank you for your generosity. We raised $22 towards the bonus content. So womp womp, no bonus content today, but maybe tomorrow. We can't go 2 days without unlocking the bonus content. That's no fun. We don't want to miss out on our incredible, great grift off Liberty Loot Live or our show and tell games. Hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and we'll see you right back again here tomorrow on the Wake Up America show and the 4 Liberty Network.
Picture this. It's 1776. Thomas Jefferson is hunched over his desk at Monticello, ink-stained fingers, writing the most radical document in human history. Do you really think he was sipping Starbucks? No. He was drinking something bold, something black, something brewed strong enough to fuel a revolution. That's the spirit behind Founding Flavors, our signature line of liberty-fueled coffee. No soy froth, no climate guilt, no corporate slogans. Just real coffee, inspired by the men who wrote freedom into existence. Every cup is a quiet protest. Against mediocrity, against tyranny, against bad coffee. So this morning, skip the globalist brew. Grab something worthy of a free man's sunrise. Founding Flavors. Now brewing at forlibertyshop.com.